Hi and welcome to Let's Talk ASPM. My name is Mark Lambert. I'm the Chief Product Officer here at ArmorCode, and I'm very happy to introduce one of our newest team members, Dana Torgersen. How are we doing, Dana?
Good, Mark. How are you, sir?
Very good. Thank you very much. Thank you for coming on. Looking forward to doing some more podcasts with you over the coming weeks. But we were having a really interesting conversation just the other day, and I'm like, that's a great podcast for us to talk about. Now, given your background, and maybe we'll step into your background a little bit. We were kind of like talking about how you can go from kind of like an event-based security operations kind of world, right? SIMs and SOARs, and kind of like where does ASPM fit into that? So why don't I actually turn it over to you and kind of give us a little bit of background about where you've come from and kind of like what your thinking was and kind of like what drove the conversation that we were having, and then we'll just have the conversation again.
That sounds great. We'll just have a larger crowd listen in. Thank you, Mark. My career, folks, it started back at a company back when I used to live in Minnesota called Secure Computing. Secure Computing had been busy acquiring other companies and were pretty well set as in their space for network security. So firewalls, IP filtering devices, even token IDs that were competing against the top brand of second key authentication tools, second factor authentication tools. And we got acquired by McAfee, got acquired by Intel. I went over to Palo Alto Networks to see all about the next gen firewall that they had just been launching not 2 years before that. Got to work with the great folks over at Illumio doing network microsegmentation and understanding like what's actually coming into your environment. That was actually kind of my first taste from network security to understand the larger picture of what are you doing when you're building your apps and how are you actually structuring your prod and your test and your development stages. And now that you know that, do you even know what's coming in or out of those different systems? And at the time, it was still kind of data center based, but cloud was clearly a piece of it. And in that time, since I worked at Illumio, it has just been a digital migration like nobody's seen before, just racing to the cloud. So that I also got to spend some time at Malwarebytes, getting to see the product, how they're helping folks remediate damages from ransomware attacks. I was there when a lot of popular attacks were actually happening, so there was a lot of unfortunate news for organizations around the globe. But it was also a great moment to be there to know that we had a solution that could actually actively help. And from then, it was getting more into the SOC, more into the security operations realm. All those products that I was marketing, all those customers that we were helping, their logs just went somewhere. It just did something. We didn't care at the time. Well, yeah, it went to the SOC. It went to the SOC team. It went on their shoulders. And those were all the alerts. And so working at JASK and then, of course, being acquired and working at Sumo Logic for 5 years total, that gave me a first-class seat, a master class in the security operations world and how CISOs are structuring their teams to go and find those threats, find those security alerts. And what do you do with them? And how do you keep your team from getting burned out and with alert fatigue? And how can you move faster? How can you use automation to your benefit? You mentioned SOAR. That's a great piece too. In the last 5 years, the SOAR tools have kind of been gobbled up because industry analysts are saying these tools have really got to be part of your SIM solution. Okay, that means we have to have a SIM. And this time, I realized we're setting the table to be protecting what really matters most to companies, and that is their SaaS cloud-native apps. And so we were more on I guess you would look at it through the infrastructure lens, but it was on the threat side of the aisle, frankly. I wasn't thinking, I didn't have my cap on for the risk side. And so I'd love to hear your thoughts too on that, because that's what attracted me. And so for folks listening in, this is what appealed to me when I got to talk to Nikhil, our CEO and founder, got to talk to Mark, got to talk to Aaron, our chief marketing officer, who I get to work with again. This is just amazing to think about how much risk is out there. And I think I appreciated that there was risk, but the articulation, the normalization of risk versus just normalizing signals or alerts together and correlating risk versus correlating signals and insights, and then understanding, well, what do you do? What's the prioritization? What do you do next? And sure enough, here's ArmorCode with an answer to that question.
Yeah, and it really it's as you were just talking, I was kind of thinking to myself, I was like, what are we going to call this podcast? And really, I think it's something along the lines of like, how do you move from a reactive event threat driven world into a more proactive, risk posture reduction world? And this is kind of like the we've talked before about how do you kind of shift left? I mean, that's the overused term, right? But we think about, hey, I've got an event that's come in. That event may correlate to a vulnerability, be it a CVE, or be it an actual kind of something that's a vulnerability identified through red teaming or penetration testing or what have you, or even using kind of like, looking at those event logs and saying, okay, that is kind of like really coming in from the right. Something's happened. I wanted to see the thing that has happened. Now I'm trying to identify the root cause. Then I want to go further. It's not just the vulnerability, it's the weakness that's underlying that. Yes, it could be a software composition analysis vulnerability, but if it's something like an actual vulnerability in the code you've developed, then you have to go further left. Or you're trying to find the weakness with a SAST or something like that. So it's really a chain going all the way to the left. And the further left you go, the more preventative you can be. So, if I think about kind of like, or should I say not preventive, proactive I can be. So, if I can identify a CVE in my code base through software composition analysis or container analysis, then I can identify and prioritize that to be remediated before the event is detected. So, we talked about, MTTR, right? And that was kind of like a mutual mystification between the two of us, because you were mean time to response, I was mean time to remediation or resolution. And that's a good analogy or an example of how these two worlds change. Because what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to be proactive. I'm trying to prevent the outage from occurring in the first place. If I'm looking at a vulnerability that's not a CVE related vulnerability, if I'm looking at something which is my own code, this is a vulnerability that's within my code base, then I'm looking to identify weaknesses in the code base that I can put a strategy in place to make sure I proactively address those before they become exposed as a vulnerability and exposed as an event, ultimately going down that line.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, we're over here with our arms crossed in threat land, and we're talking about mean time to respond, and we tell the developers, we tell the DevOps teams and the SRE teams, like, yeah, go fix it. And of course, it would appear from that lens that these other folks, these other brothers and sisters, but they are across an aisle. Don't let anybody forget, there's this chasm still that has to be crossed. And now they're going to go fix stuff. And even at Sumo Logic, it was fix S word faster was even the slogan. Whereas a security person would maybe want to secure something quickly. That gets into automation, that gets into utilization of AI. You got to keep up with, of course, the bad actors out there. But this shifting left, the fact that we talk about shift left, but it's actually being done by all this great work, all these wonderful AppSec tools that are out there in the world. It's just that from my lens now, being on the job here and of course soaking up everything I can from the fire hose, there's an awful lot of tools. Maybe there's too many tools. And so now really the question becomes, what are you going to do with it? And it's a very similar question back on the threat dial when you're dealing with so many different tools. I worked with customers when I was at 𝗪𝗶𝘁, and we were now the first choice, but they had 2, 3, 4 other choices running on a poor laptop. And it's no wonder that some of these laptops, predominantly Windows systems, are just sluggish and painful for the users. Of course, what happens then? The user wants to reject it. They want to turn it off. They want to disable it. Now your security's gone out the door. And so you start to think about all these different tools. What do? You need to bring it all into one place. Now here we are, AppSec world. All these different tools, you need to bring it in one place. But it's not just the scanning, it's also the infrastructure too. I realize you're getting into RBVM, risk-based vulnerability management, and now you've got another slew of tools, and they need a place to live, a place to go.
So this is a great place for us to pick up our conversation, because I think the next round of things that we need to go through in a subsequent podcast is really picking apart from that event and going left, right, through the vulnerability management, through the infrastructure, through cloud, infrastructure as code, to DAST, SAST. What do all of these acronyms mean?
Yeah.
this is a really good point to pause, and we'll come back and let's start doing that podcast series. And then what we'll do is we'll step through each of those through the lens from an application security guy and the lens from an event guy. So I think that sounds like a great plan.
It sounds like a Vulcan mind meld that's waiting to happen.
Exactly. All right. Well, thanks everybody for watching. Watch out for more podcast episodes. Dana, myself, Dana's also going to be doing some interviewing with different folks as well. So as always, click like, subscribe, be safe, and we look forward to seeing you on the next episode. Dana, thanks very much for joining us today.
Thank you, Mark. My pleasure. Cheers, folks.
Take care.